Welcome to another episode of the Walk the Line podcast. I'll be your host, Greg Sowers. And today for episode 42, we have Matt Berry joining the podcast. And Matt was the former head coach of Johns Hopkins University, was the former assistant coach and goalie coach for Stevenson University, and has recently moved to Nashville and working with youth and adult goalies in the Nashville area. So at this time, I'd like to welcome Matt onto the Walk the Line podcast. How's it going, Matt?
Yeah, it's going great. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, we're going to be just like I've been doing the past three episodes where we talked about the five qualities of a good forward defenseman. Actually, it was a centerman and a winger, broke those up. So I don't have the expertise, unfortunately, to talk about goaltenders. So Matt was thankfully willing to come on and discuss that. But before we get into those specific to goaltenders, just want to talk and introduce Matt and get a little bit of his background for the listeners. So Matt, where did you start playing, your youth hockey? Where did, the playing goaltending come from?
Yeah, so my family's all from Minnesota, so hockey's been I was born into the hockey sport. I grew up, my dad always wanted me to play out and be a good skater, and I obliged for a little bit, but then couldn't really get away from the itch of playing goalie. So I grew up playing the net. All through high school, played youth hockey in Maryland at the AA and AAA level. Played for my high school team and did pretty well. After high school, I ended up going back and playing out with my dad in men's league. Spent a couple years doing that, and then after getting a little bit better playing out, I actually went back to school to degree in psychology, and with that I was able to play hockey, and I decided to become a defenseman. And obviously playing goalie my whole life, I had to really put the effort in to learn from my coaches and the teammates, and after that I ended up becoming a starting defenseman for a national championship contender. And later on in my college career, I think it was like my senior year, our goalie got hurt, which kind of provided an opportunity for me to get back in the net. So I was able to then play goalie at a competitive level again. When I first started, I had about 2 practices, was thrown in the fire. The first 2 games we played against Virginia Tech and Liberty. Over 100 shots in those 2 games, but I did pretty well. I think we lost 1-0 in the first game, and then like 8-5 against Liberty, and they were kind of a powerhouse in those years when I was playing, and I think they still are. So it was kind of like riding a bike and just getting back into it.
Yeah, just getting thrown into the fire, I guess, with 100 shots in your first 2 games as a goalie. Before we get into your after playing and the coaching aspect, you mentioned you got a major in psychology, and we know, goalies, you have to be this mentally tough individual or athlete because of, you're back there on an island by yourself. Do you have any, was there any connections between, the psychology and the education side that you use to, I guess, stay, mentally in a game or respond to maybe a bad goal? Did any of that correlate?
I think so, for sure. Growing up, back in the day, they always talked about how, goalies were always, a little bit nutty in a way. Like you said, they're kind of on their own island and they act in a different way. And I mean, it is a completely different position. But when I was kind of growing up, my thought process was like, guys, like I'm, this is a team sport. I'm on the team, and even now, the way I kind of coach is, for team coaching, is really including the goaltender in a lot of things that happen on the ice. And that mentalness and that psychology, it kind of goes along with intentionality, meaning, as a goalie, the puck goes down to the offensive zone, and you're just kind of sitting there waiting for it to come back to you. So you got a lot of time,
Right.
with you and your thoughts. So just being mentally strong and being able to, stay present and stay within the game, and all that is a huge aspect, when playing goalie. So my passion for psychology definitely kind of coincides with that.
Yeah, and I actually got another follow-up question to that. So you mentioned that the uh, man, I forgot the question. It was going to be a really good question, Matt. I swear. Oh, playing D. So in my experience, most goalies start as a goalie. Whether it's the little brother that gets thrown in net, and that's where it starts. But it's kind of rare for at least me to hear that you played so long out as a defenseman. Do you think when you switch back to goaltender that it allowed you to view that game from a different perspective? Whereas if I'm a goalie my whole youth career, I just see the goalie position as it is, but you had the opportunity to play defense. Do you think that allowed you to think about the position in a different way, whether that's, I think my D is going to block the shot here, or he's going to throw a muffin right up the middle? Like, did that aspect, being able to play multiple positions, you think help you goaltending wise?
Yeah, I think for sure. And I think it kind of goes both ways. Obviously playing goalie my whole life, a big aspect of that is, being able to see the entire ice. You're pretty much sitting back and watching the game, and then kind of reacting. And when I started playing defense, it, gave me that perspective of, like as a goalie, it was almost like, I think I played back in high school. I ended up playing 1 year of football, and I was a safety. And really, I just played football because everyone said I couldn't do it, and my ego was like, no, I can do it. And it kind of went against hockey season, so I missed a few games, but it was like playing safety, where I was able to almost read the play and kind of know exactly what was going to happen next. And that's what I kind of brought from playing goalie, being able to kind of like see the ice, reading the play, where it's going. And then when I started playing out and playing defense, that aspect definitely helped me a lot to, be able to read every play that's come in and then really understand what the goalie's seeing. And now with that being said, I think it does provide a little bit of, down points in the way of when when the puck goes to the point as a defenseman, I'm going out and I'm trying to block it and sometimes screen the goalie just because my immediate reaction is, hey, I need to stop this puck.
Right.
So there are little things here and there that, do help a lot. But obviously there are some habits that are hard to get out of.
Yeah.
But I think just having that overall experience of being able to play all these positions really gave me a good understanding of the entire sport, and it's kind of really helped me even with coaching. So like even coaching the whole team, being able to work with, forwards and defense, but then also including the goaltenders in whether it's practices or, schemes that I'm running.
Okay. Well, and that's all good information. And I to another follow up, and then we'll get to your coaching career. You said you're able to, because you played goalie and played out, and you've had the opportunity to, head coach teams. You mentioned that goalies need to be involved in practice and know what's going on. Where like that's something me as a head coach for high school and even my Bantams, I don't have the goaltending expertise, whether it be angles or where they should be directed rebounds, or I'm basically saying, hey goalie, just please stop the puck for me, and if you do that, we'll be good. And that's a fault of my own, and I need to get better at it. But from a coaching perspective, for coaches that are listening, what do you think? How do you incorporate goalie specific? Is it drills? Is it just making sure they're watching the drills that are drawn on the board? Like how do you I guess pull in a goalie more so into practice than a dummy like me who basically just wants the goalie to stop the puck?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it kind of coincides with even what a lot of USA Hockey is doing these days. Obviously, I've worked with, some of the goaltending directors in USA Hockey, and they're doing a lot of work with teaching really just coaches on how to incorporate goaltending, how to not just like throw a kid in the net and just like you said, just have them stop pucks, because there's obviously, there's big argument around, quantity versus quality of shots. So, goalies getting all these shots. It's like, oh yeah, coaches like, oh, they're getting plenty of shots. They're getting the work done. But they're not really getting, the technical coaching. And what I like to do is really be more communicative with my goaltenders of like, all right, what kind of warm up do you like feels good for you? So maybe that's just, you start with a lot of outside shots and getting them to be able to see the puck to start practice, and giving them the opportunity to, get that good warm up, then goes a long way with them being able to be included in a lot of the battle drills. And as a coach, I'd like to make sure that I'm not really wearing down my goalies, because there is a point where, you get too many shots in the first half of practice, and then the second half of practice, they're either, creating bad habits, or, putting themselves in a position to get injured because they're tired and they're, doing a battle drill, or doing, full ice scrimmage where now they're,
Hmm.
it's like they have no more effort to really put in. So a lot of the drills that I do really think about, all right, how can this incorporate everybody on the ice, whether that is defensively or offensively, and then just kind of running with the schemes. And like my defensive scheme is very heavily on including the goalie with everything. So it's not like I have 5 skaters on the ice. I have 5 skaters and a goalie. So incorporating them in the defensive scheme.
Hmm. Okay, well, and kind of pivoting to your coaching, was the head coach at John Hopkins University, was that your first gig, or did it start somewhere before that?
So I did a little bit. So right out of high school, I was doing a little bit of coaching for my high school. My dad was actually the head coach, so I jumped in as an assistant coach there. And so I would kind of consider that my first coaching position. And high school in Maryland, high school hockey in Maryland wasn't too crazy at the public level. So we had a few practices to start, and then maybe like 10 games with no practice in between. So, we had to kind of coach on the go, which was interesting in the way of, now my coaching style is I don't really like to coach on the bench, more in practice, because a lot of the kids know exactly, like, if they make a mistake, they know they did something wrong, and I'm not going to berate them when they get back to the bench, just reinforce something like that.
Right.
But so I started there. And then, yeah, my first head coaching job was with John Hopkins. It was a D3 club team. And really, it was more about, we had a bunch of guys that, were new to hockey or had some experience in hockey. There wasn't a ton of recruiting because of, the difficulty of just being accepted to a university like John Hopkins.
Hmm.
And then also the programs are pretty rigorous there. So I wanted to make sure that the kids were mainly focusing on their academics. So kind of creating that balance was a little tough to start off, but I think we did pretty well. And a lot of we were able to get a lot of new players, teach them the game of hockey, and also be competitive in the league. And then kind of moving from there, went on to Stevenson. And there I was an assistant coach. So I was running most of the practices, and then also, coaching most of the goalies. We had a D2 and a D3 ACHA team. So I was kind of jumping around all the practices, and then would go to the games if they lined up.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had experience with club hockey teams in the Nashville area, and club hockey is so tough to to gauge, because you can go to like a Liberty and it's intense and it's committed, and all the guys are there to obviously pursue a goal of whether it's winning the league or going to nationals. And then you have some club hockey programs where it's a little more relaxed, and it's the guys are there to still play hockey, but it's basically a glorified men's league. And I'm not saying that's what John Hopkins is, but it's hard to find a consistent groove coaching wise, depending on the year or the talent or the type of mentality that your program has from the school. So but yeah, so John Hopkins, and then going to Stevenson so you were the assistant coach and the goalie coach. So just a little more about that role. Obviously, and as assistant, I'm thinking that the head coach is setting lines and things like that. But as a goalie coach, were you given practice slots just with the goalies, or was it more of, hey, you get the first 5 minutes at practice to work with the goalies? How did that work at the club hockey level?
Yeah, so obviously, the club hockey teams have a specific budget, and that budget's not necessarily coming from the school. So it's not a huge budget. So we had to kind of, manage ice time, and that's always been a tough thing, especially with goalie coaching. And Even now with finding ice, and you only have 3 guys out there versus doing an entire camp with 20 skaters. So making sure that we're not finding the right amount of ice time and getting the work in. When I was at Stevenson, a lot of it was, like you said, working with the goalies for the first 15 to 20 minutes, just doing some real technique things, and then throughout the practice, it's really having them have some kind of intentionality on what they want to work on. So, if a goalie's working on glove saves, I want to make sure that they're, in every drill, they're working on, how intentional they are with those glove saves and what do they notice throughout the thing, and then just being able to communicate with them, on the ice and then after the practice and before practices, just to kind of make sure that, they know exactly what they're working on rather than just going in and saying, hey, stop as many pucks as you can. And I think some goalies kind of lose track of that, meaning like they're just there to get through the practice when, being able to work as a goalie and improve as a goalie definitely requires, it's good to have a coach, but at the same time, you're also your own coach.
Right.
Especially with the lack of goalie coaches and things like that, where, if, you want to go into every practice knowing, hey, what do I want to improve on today? Whether your coach knows it or not, whether your coach like puts drills together that help you, being your own coach is a huge aspect of it.
Yeah, and obviously with USA Hockey over the past few years, they've been making basically there's this initiative to focus more on goaltenders, and obviously that's important. And like I said before, I need to do a better job of that. I'm sure a lot of coaches out there need to do the same. So with that in mind, you as a goaltending coach and kind of getting your feet wet coaching in the Nashville area, I think it's a good segue to start talking about those 5 qualities that you think make up make a good goaltender. So however you want to do this, we can go one. If they're categorized or ranked in any way, or we just go 1 through 5. But what's the first one you want to speak to?
Yeah, so putting 5 together is kind of tough. I think there are a ton of aspects in goaltending that really make a great goaltender. The one thing I do want to start with is it's kind of like 3 in 1, but it's flexibility, strength, and conditioning. Flexibility is a huge thing, not just to have a perfect butterfly or be able to reach for those long, big pucks, but it's also to stay healthy. And you can't really be a great goaltender if you're consistently sidelined with injuries, and flexibility goes a long way with making hindering those opportunities for injury, and keeping you on the ice. And that goes along with like the strength and conditioning. And like I said before, you go to practice as a goalie and you're tired probably halfway through the practice, and then all of a sudden now you're putting yourself in a position to get injured, where doing off ice conditioning, strengthening your legs, and pretty much every aspect of being an athlete is a huge aspect into being a good goaltender.
Yeah, and so you just talking NHL goalies respectively, it's you look at these guys and some of them are monsters, and they're 6'4", 6'5", and they're not necessarily the the bulkiest guys. When you talk strength, you're not talking how much can you bench, how much can you squat. It's more of the strength that is applicable to the goalie, goalie movements, whether it's pushing across the crease, I guess, and things like that. So if you, and I'm not, I guess I'm questioning your training abilities here off the ice, but is there any movement strength wise that particularly relate to a goaltender on the ice that you could recommend?
Yeah, so and I know there's different skating drills out there for goalies. My biggest thing with coaching strength and conditioning is really that intentionality part, meaning when you're doing skating drills, it's not a race. It's really finding those edges, finding those muscles that you're using to, do a pad slide across, or doing shuffles, or long shuffles to short shuffles, big T pushes, big pushes across the crease. Really finding, what muscles groups you're using when you're, making those movements, and not really rushing them. So, being able to understand what muscles you're using when you're playing goalie, taking it slow, and then as you really get more comfortable with that, then you can start to create that speed, and really go all out once you have, that control of those muscle groups. And like you said, I'm not really a conditioning coach, but I do follow a few that are specific to goaltending. I'll shoot a plug out to Maria Mountain. She's a pretty famous uh, strength and conditioning coach that works specifically with a lot of goalies. And I usually just go kind of find her stuff, and she has a lot of good, exercises and things that they can do off ice.
Okay, and I'll touch base with you after this, and I can get her, if she has an Instagram handle or a website or something, we can get that added to the show notes for people to go and look at. All right, so that was a good first one. What's your second one on the list?
Yes, my second on the list would be, as I categorize it, as hunger. So that is, that includes intensity, how bad you want it. Like I said, being intentional and being intentional with every save. So that's, really, goalies can go out there and kind of let the game come to them when, they are an athlete on the ice. And, when I look at a goalie, I want them to be excited when the puck starts making it your way in the game. And obviously, being able to, have that intensity on the ice. And, when you see the puck, I always say, I want you to be hungry for the puck. I want you to, attack the puck. And that can really step up your game, especially with rebounds around the, front of the net, being a really big part and making an impact in the game. So having that drive, having that hunger, having that want to make a save. There was always a famous thing with baseball where, pitchers would always talk about, they weren't trying to strike out the bat, or they weren't trying to strike out the bat. It was all about the batter needed to hit their ball. So it's kind of bring it to hockey. As a goaltender, you want that shooter has to beat you. So if you have that hunger and intensity and saying oh yeah, there's this guy has no chance of beating me, instead of saying, all right, I got to stop him, kind of going back to that mentalness, having that, that intensity and drive to be in that mind space really can go a long way.
Yeah, that's, again, I'm not the technical goaltender guy, but, as just a coach who obviously has goalies on their team, that's one thing that I look for when we're at tryouts or something, is the goalie's willingness to not give up on a play. If you think you're beat and you just give up and sit in your butterfly while the guy skates past you and puts puck in it, that doesn't look too good. Even if you don't make the save, having that competitiveness and the will to stop the puck, to maybe reach back with your stick or do something to try to keep the puck out of your net is something, again, not as a official goalie guy, is something I can, pick up on as just your general hockey coach. So that's another good point to make. So good 2 points. What's your third?
Yeah, so go to number 3 is another kind of combined one of, skating, edge work, and balance. So obviously, I know in the previous podcast you talked about, the different positions, and skating was a big aspect in everything, and that is pretty much a big aspect in hockey. You're on the ice, and it's a sport where it's so unique that we're being athletes on an eighth of an inch blade, and being able to have those abilities in skating is a big thing with goaltending. Meaning, being able to move around the net. Any goalie, you can be a shooter tutor and just kind of sit there net and try to cover up as much of the net as you can. But at the same time, you're still an athlete on the ice, and, going from just stopping what you can, stand in the way of, to then being an active participant in the game and making, those multiple saves in and around all around the defensive zone is a huge thing. So, skating, edge work, like I said before, I'm a big guy in intentionality. Edge work is, being able to really be intentional with the edges. I know even skaters and goalies, even, when you see them fall on the ice, you're like, all right, how'd that guy fall? He's a great skater. It's most likely because there wasn't any intentionality, or he got a little lackadaisical. You turn and, you forget to really push off one skate, or you push off a skate and you're not really intentional about getting that edge, or then your pad's slipping out. So really having those aspects of skating and edge work. And I know a lot of goalie coaches really drive home that, being able to control your edges And I like to make sure that goalies understand that, edge work is for skating. It's also for power. It's also for pushing and being able to move around the crease. And then that kind of leads into the balance part of, having good balance on skates, meaning obviously skaters are moving forward and back where goalies are kind of more stationary. And then kind of knowing where your center of gravity is, especially when goalies are going down and, up and down. So their weight is being transferred a lot over the place, and kind of combining that with skating and edge work is huge for one, eliminate injuries, and then two, also being able to control every aspect of your game. If you're pushing to a rebound, and you see a lot of goalies flopping around, and usually that's the desperation. So if you're a goalie that has, takes one shot and then the next save is a desperation, rather than taking a shot and then having some intentionality and control to then push to the next shot, and then maybe the fourth or fifth shot is a desperation because defense is lacking or something like that.
Yeah.
But having that control is a huge aspect of goaltending.
Yeah, and I'm sure I said this with when talking about forwards and defensemen in the previous podcast, but you can never be too good of a skater, right? So it's always something you can work on and improve on, and there's always room to improve with that. Same with skaters and same with goalies. But I did have a follow-up question for you. So, with both my teams, we don't necessarily have a goalie coach. Well, we definitely don't have a goalie coach at every practice, but we do have our players working on skating, usually in the first part of practice, whether it's a warm-up drill and they're working on edges and then they go shoot a puck. As a goaltending coach, let's just say we're doing, the Russian circles where, the skaters are going around the top of the circle, then the bottom of the circle on the other side, and repeat on the other end of the ice. Would you rather, or do you have anything to say with, would you want your goalies included in those, player skating drills, or would you rather have them work on, specific goalie, in the crease movements? I guess, is there a knock against working as a skater, but you're wearing, your goaltending equipment?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. For me, I definitely believe in goalies should be able to essentially do everything that a skater can do. So a lot of the times when I'm like helping out with camps or anything like that, where it's skaters and goalies included, and there's a big skating aspect to it where it's just up and down the ice, different edge work, I like to see my goalies pretty much do exactly what the players would be doing. We have kind of the same edges, whether they're sharpened or not, the same way. Having that conditioning, having that understanding of how to skate is a huge aspect, because when you think about it, as a goalie, being comfortable on your skates is more than just being able to crouch in a stance and push side to side, side to side. You're moving in all directions, and being able to have kind of that athleticism to be able to skate just like a player is huge. And that also goes with conditioning, and also goes with that hunger part where, when you do those big, bag skating drills, my biggest thing is I want the goalies to be almost competing. Like, I want them, if I can have a goalie that's catching up to players, one, that pushes the players, and then two, that shows that goalie is, putting everything he has into that, and kind of not making the excuse that he's got, extra 30 pounds of pads on. So it just kind of like then really shows you how much, that goalie really wants to be out there.
Yeah, it's always tough when you get beat by a goalie in a conditioning drill or something. So I'm sure that's fun for a goalie if it happens. But all right,
sure.
no, but these are all good points. But we'll move on to the fourth one.
Yeah. So my fourth one is, vision and understanding of the game. So I know I mentioned this previously, where goalies have the opportunity to be able to see the entire ice. Obviously they do have to look over their shoulder when it's below the goal line, but usually below the goal line shouldn't be a very worrisome place for the puck to be when it's tough to score from there. So, having a goalie that really is able to have their head on a swivel, being able to see how the play progresses in the defensive zone, really understanding how the games work. And I think that can go a long way to be a great goaltender. And that also off the ice is really studying the game. So being able to watch, when you're watching hockey on TV or you're watching other games or other, players or other goalies, just being able to see kind of how different players, create opportunities in the offensive zone against the goalie. That can really create a very good aspect for a goalie to be able to read plays and then be able to react and, say it's a 2-on-1, understanding, all right, what does it look like when, is this guy going to shoot it, or am I going to have to make a big push to make the save on the pass? So just really understanding aspects like that. And I know there was a big thing with like Dubnik, and he got really good all of a sudden one season because his goalie coach was talking about the excessive amount of movements he was making on the power play, or really the penalty kill for him. And what that just showed was like, hey, maybe you should just sit in the kind of like almost like sit in the crease during the power play and watch the puck go around, the horn as the offense is moving the puck, and just really being able to read, where this play is progressing in order to then not put too much effort into these little movements, but really, pushing towards the play and understanding where the play is going to end up to then make the save there.
Yeah, and that anticipation aspect of predicting where that puck is going to go, obviously a big part of being a goaltender and where to expect that shot from. The vision aspect, and I've talked about this on previous podcasts too. It's like, and Matt, I'm thinking you were the same way, but when I was growing up, or like even now, whenever there's a chance to watch a hockey game, I'm generally watching a hockey game. I'm to the disagreement of my wife, probably. If there's hockey on, it's probably always on in my house. And it's like kids now, I feel like they're not watching. They're on YouTube, or they're playing the game on an Xbox or whatever. It's like you can learn so much about whatever position you play just by watching the game of hockey. And it's interesting that you said as a goalie you should watch what the offensive players are doing to kind of learn and predict where plays are going to proceed and happen. So like when I'm having conversations with skaters, it's like, okay, pick a defenseman, on the Predators, and for that period or that game, whatever you're doing, just watch that player. That way you can enjoy watching the game. But whenever you see, Roman Josi on the ice, just see what he does, see how he acts, see how he moves, see how he supports his teammates, things like that. And I just think there's not a lot of that going on anymore for some reason. And you don't understand the value of just watching the game and being a student of the game.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that shift is happening with, obviously a lot of even like players and skaters. It's heavily a skill-based game now, where back in the day, like, we didn't have guys doing the Michigan move or, taking rocket slap shots, and, these dangle moves and everything like that. So there's a lot of skill-based that is kind of, evolving the game a little bit. And like you said, the YouTube videos are, all about like, how can you improve your stick handling? How can you improve these specific skills when, that hockey IQ is something that, you can't just sit there and hope that it comes to you. That's like really engaging in the game, embracing every aspect. We talked about how I was playing, different positions, where as a player, I love playing out now because I played goalie and I know exactly what the hardest shots are to save, or I know exactly, what I see as a goalie when I'm coming down a breakaway or a shot from the point or anything like that, where I now have that understanding of how the game works as a whole, rather than, anything specifically, any skills individually. So I think that's a big aspect, especially for a goalie, to really understand how the game flows, especially how it's evolving with these skill sets, and being able to, be a high hockey IQ kind of player.
Yeah, well, maybe you and me need to have a conversation after this about how I can score more in men's league, because my stat line is not impressive. And I was a defenseman, so I blame it on that. But if you could tell me where to shoot, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, and then I'll take some skill lessons from you as well, because I might have the hockey IQ, but I haven't been playing out my whole life. So,
all right. So moving on to the last quality, number 5.
So my number 5 is a little bit unconventional. It's being a 3-dimensional goaltender. So this kind of goes to, my goalie coaching business is 3D goaltending, and where that 3D came from was that 3-dimensionality. And what that means is, like, like you said earlier, like there are guys who are 6'7", right? They're going to cover up this giant area of the net. They can sit in there and squeeze in the net frame and whatever, but the net is always going to be, 4 feet by 6 feet. So that's going to be consistent. And like the smaller goalies being able to adapt to something like that, where, if you have a small goalie and they're watching a 6'7" guy, be like, all right, I'm going to do everything this guy's doing. That might not work best for them, because now they're, clearly not being able to sink back in their net, really, take advantage of their height, where being a three-dimensional goaltender is really understanding the depths of not just where you're skating, but then also where you're positioning your body, meaning you got your hands out. There used to be a huge thing around like box control and goalie coaching, which has somewhat diminished in a way. I kind of have to keep reiterating it to, youth goalies about it's, the simple physics of where the puck can go from the ice into the 4x6 net, where if you have your hands out maybe 2 to 3 inches, you're covering up a huge portion of the net just based on the physics of all of it. And that's, and back with like the hunger part, being a three-dimensional goalie is really not just sitting back in the net waiting for the puck to come to you. I've seen a lot of goalies where, they'll get on the post, a pass will go right through the crease, and they'll let it go through and then follow it to try to leave on the other post. When turn in your, maybe it's coming from the right corner, you turn in your left skate out, where now you're just cutting off that pass completely. And also that goes along with, having a goalie that understands the defensive schemes of, if we're leaving a guy back door, it's on purpose for, the goalie's not letting a pass go through the crease. So just being able to understand, as a goalie, that's your space. That is, there is depth, there is angles, but then also how you position your body, how you, create your movements, and really attack the puck can really go a long way.
Yeah, and so I think all of these points are great, and it was educational for me to listen to a goalie guy talk about these things, just because, like I said, it's not something that's ingrained in a player or even a coach, from a USA Hockey perspective until recently. So, the more that you can help educate, the goaltenders in Nashville, the better Nashville hockey will be off. But I kind of wanted to open up to you to let everybody listen and know where they can find more about you and 3D goaltending. If you had a website, or you wanted to speak about the things that you're offering.
Yeah. So, obviously moving to Nashville, my goal really is to do as much coaching as possible. I think, I've been working with, some guys from the junior Preds and the Nashville Flyers. And I know there's specific goaltenders for different programs, or different goaltender coaches for specific programs. And, a lot of them are, spread pretty thin. And so my goal is to kind of fill any voids there, really create a community of goaltenders. I think, with the limited amount of goaltender coaches, I think as goalies, we also find ways to teach each other. So my kind of goal is to create a community of goalies that, one, we can kind of come together, create, that community to be able to talk about different things, work on different things together, hear different, experiences and aspects of the game, but then also be able to coordinate a lot of, private sessions or group skating sessions, things like that. With the ice time being tough to grab, and its majority going to a lot of the skaters, us goalies kind of had to bind together and really work together to, improve and get better on our own. So my goal really is to, with the 3D goaltending, is to create that community. And really I'm just kind of building it through right now, the bench app, just kind of putting together a bunch of, parents and goalies. And I want everyone to kind of be, communicative with each other, because we're all kind of in this together. So as for the 3D goaltending, I do have a website. It's 3dgoaltending.com. You can also find me on Instagram at 3D goaltending. And it's kind of like really getting off. I know, Greg, you've been helping me with like a lot of opportunities and making those connections, and I appreciate that greatly. So I think, in the next coming months, it's really going to start to, improve and get a lot more opportunities out there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm glad you were able to come on and discuss, goaltending for our listeners, and I'm sure they're going to get a lot out of it. And just for the listeners, we'll put Matt's website in the show notes, as well as his Instagram handle, and then we'll also include that the goaltending off ice trainer that you referenced earlier. But I'll put that in the show notes as well for anybody who wants to check that out. But I guess just a final wrap up question before I let you go. If you could recommend one goalie for a youth hockey player to watch at the NHL level, do you have one in mind, and who would that be?
So skill, it's hard to not watch Vasilevsky, but with his size and the difference between his size and youth goalies,
Right.
That's a tough one. I think one of my favorite goaltenders was actually in Nashville is Pecorine. So kind of going back and watching kind of some of his stuff, just kind of the intensity and the hard work that he brought to every game. He was always a goaltender that I knew this guy's not going to give up on a puck. This guy's going to do everything he can to, make that save. And he was technically sound, and for all the right reasons, he's got a statue outside of Bridgestone. So, looking for goalies like that, I know, there's a lot of technical things out there where having a, very sound, strong goalie is kind of what some coaches are looking for. But at the same time, I think, we're more than just goalies. We're more than just shooters. We're athletes on the ice. And when you are able to watch a goaltender that is really taking advantage of that and being super athletic on the ice, those are the ones that I love to watch.
Well, awesome. Well, again, Matt, I appreciate you coming on. I told you it was going to be about 15, 20 minutes, and we're going on minute 42. So I appreciate your time, and I'm sure the listeners do as well. Like I said, I'll have every thing that Matt mentioned regarding his links in the show notes for anyone who wants to check it out. This will also be posted on my Instagram at coach_Greg_Sowers. And you can find the link there. It's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for any of those if you want to share it. But Matt, I wanted to say thank you again, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime in the future.
Sounds good. And yeah, definitely appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening to the Walk the Line podcast, and I'll talk to you next week. Thanks.